The crimson moon of Zarian 7 bled across the battlefield as Commander Davin Kine pressed himself against the twisted hull of a downed transport, his pulse steady even as plasma bolts carved glowing scars through the night. Each shot screamed. Through the thin atmosphere, sparks bursting like angry stars against the metal around him. He counted the rhythm of his breaths 1, 2, 3 before sliding his visor up just enough to scan the chaos unfolding beyond the wreckage. The peace. Summit had gone to hell in spectacular fashion. One moment, dignitaries from half a dozen systems were exchanging ceremonial oaths beneath the crimson sky. The next, an explosion tore the dais apart, scattering bodies like broken dolls across the dust. Someone had tried to assassinate the Jarathi Empress, the Empress, and now 3 factions were locked in a frenzy, firing at anything that moved. Davin's orders were simple: extract survivors. Get them off this cursed rock before the bloodbath spread. Simple, he thought bitterly, like pulling a needle from a burning haystack while the barn collapses. His visor display flickered with the names of fallen convoy personnel, a grim roll call he couldn't stop scrolling through. Too many. Always. Too many. He crouched lower as another volley of plasma fire screamed overhead, the air itself trembling under the heat. The wreckage smelled of scorched metal and ionized blood. His throat was dry beneath the respirator, but he ignored the ache. Ears straining for any sound beyond the chaos, a cry, a whisper, anything human. What he heard instead was music. Faint, melodic, barely there. It wasn't words, not at first, just a tremor of sound that didn't belong to war. Davin stilled, muscles taut, and angled toward it, boots crunching softly on broken crystal panels. The sound grew clearer. Voice, pained yet impossibly graceful, carrying undertones like a chord strummed on glass. He rounded a jagged slab of hull plating and stopped dead. She lay half-buried beneath debris, her once pristine ceremonial robes shredded and soaked with a shimmering fluid that glowed pale blue in the moonlight. Empress Kalstra of the Jarathi, the most untouchable being in 17, star system slumped against a curved shard of her shattered shuttle. Her silver-kissed skin, usually luminous with health, was dulled and streaked with blood. Wounds burned through her shoulder and side, edges crisped by energy fire. Each breath she drew was shallow, trembling, yet her eyes, those multifaceted jewels, locked on him with a feral spark of command. "Human," she rasped, voice soft but edged with steel. "You must not approach." Davin had attended enough diplomatic briefings to know what that meant. Jarathi law. Their monarch was sacred, forbidden to be touched by any who weren't of the royal bloodline. Touch from an inferior species wasn't just taboo, it was death for both parties. Tradition carved in iron, enforced for millennia. But her hand, it was shaking, inching weakly toward a fallen weapon she'd never lived in time. Her lifeblood pooled in glowing rivulets across the dust, draining her strength with every second. "You're bleeding out," Davin said, dropping to a knee despite her warning. "I can help you." "No," she breathed, a thread of sound barely holding. "If you touch me, you die." "Then a lot of people are going to die today," he muttered, tearing open his field kit. His gloves were slick with dust as he reached for her, scanning wounds already critical. 10 minutes. Maybe less. That was all she had. Her eyes widened as his shadow fell over her. "Don't," the word broke on a gasp as his hand closed gently over hers, steadying the tremor that betrayed her control. "Then look away," Davin said quietly, his voice a low anchor against the chaos outside. "Because I'm not letting you die." Her skin was softer than he expected, like warm satin beneath his fingers. For a heartbeat, she stared at their joined hands as if the universe had shifted. And then it did. Light spilled across her skin in rippling patterns, silver filigree blazing like starlight alive, racing along her arms where his touch lingered. Her breath caught, pupils dilating as the glow intensified, flooding the wreckage. With an otherworldly brilliance that painted his armor in living light, Davin's throat went dry. What the hell? Her lips parted, her voice breaking on a whisper filled with something raw, something almost like awe. What is this? Outside, plasma fire tore the sky apart, but neither of them moved. Her fingers curled slowly, deliberately, around his hand, and she didn't let go. The research station loomed like a steel husk on the horizon, its shattered solar spires stabbing at the crimson sky. Davin moved quickly across the uneven ground, boots crunching through dust and shards of crystalline alloy, the Empress's weight pressed against him. Her arm draped over his shoulders, her slender frame tense with pain, every staggered breath a reminder of how close death still lingered. Kalstra hadn't spoken since the battlefield, though he felt the tremor in her muscles with every step. Her wounds had stabilized, barely, but her body was cold against his side, radiating a chill that crept beneath his armor. The Jerathi built themselves like living art, skin traced with shimmering silver glyphs, faces sculpted with delicate precision. Even now, streaked with blood and ash, she looked like a figure from myth, untouchable, sacred, everything his orders told him to protect, never approach, and he had broken that law. He adjusted his grip and pushed through the gaping breach in the station's hull. Darkness swallowed them, broken only by the thin glow of emergency strips flickering to life along the corridor. Dust motes floated in shafts of pale blue light as the ancient climate systems coughed awake with a tired hum. Almost there, he muttered more for himself than for her. "I warned you," she said softly, her voice breaking the silence like a shard of crystal. Even weakened, it carried that harmonic undertone that marked her species' melodic, commanding, edged with centuries of rule. "If they find us, they will kill you. Then they'll have to catch me first," Davin replied without looking. Back, his jaw tight. He shouldered open the door to what had once been a medical bay sterile surfaces now cloaked in a film of dust, and lowered her carefully onto the only intact examination table. She winced, but didn't pull away from his hands. He noticed that. Filed it away. The silver patterns on her skin, once brilliant, were now dimmed to a pale glow. His chest tightened. He'd seen enough battlefield wounds to know what that meant. She was running out of time. "You need fluid replacement," he said, rifling through his med kit. "Biogel, thermal wraps, stop." Her voice was sharper. This time, enough to make him glance up. Her eyes, those faceted, prism-like orbs fixed on him with an intensity that pinned him in place. "You don't understand. Touching me is forbidden. Your life is my problem." His tone cut clean through her words. "You think I care about your laws right now? You think I'm going to stand here and watch you die because of some ancient superstition?" He slapped a thermal patch against the table, activating the warmer. "Not happening." Her jaw tightened, breath coming in shallow bursts. "It isn't superstition. It is our foundation. Contact with lesser species is contamination. It defiles the bloodline." "My bloodline? Contamination?" His laugh was harsh. "Funny. You bleed like anyone else. Hurt like anyone else. Need someone to hold you up like anyone else." She flinched as if the words themselves struck her, then looked away, her voice dropping to a whisper. 3 centuries, she said, her hands curling weakly against the sheet. 3 centuries on the throne. And not once has anyone touched me without ritual gloves. Not once. The breath she drew trembled. "Do you understand what you've done?" "Yeah," Davin said, stepping close again. "I kept you alive." He knelt, tearing away the last of the ruined ceremonial fabric to access the wound along her side. Her skin was cool under his fingers, unnaturally smooth, like polished stone that somehow breathed. As he worked cleaning scorched tissue, sealing it with polymer gel, he felt her eyes on him, watching every motion, every touch, not with anger, not with disgust, with something else, something raw, vulnerable. When the worst of the damage was sealed, she let out a shaky exhale and whispered, "You shouldn't be this close." "Too late," he said, fastening the last wrap. He reached for her hand again, intending only to check circulation. Her fingers twitched, then stilled under his touch. For a heartbeat, neither moved. Then her hand, slender, trembling, curled around his, holding it there. "I thought," her voice broke, "I thought it would feel wrong. A violation. And now?" She lifted her gaze, the glow in her eyes softening like starlight through mist. "Warm," she whispered. "For the first time in my life, I feel warm." Gavin swallowed hard. He didn't trust his voice, so he just held her hand tighter. Outside, the crimson moon sank behind the jagged hills, and the station lights flickered like distant stars. Engines rumbled faintly on the horizon, the sound of approaching search ships. Time was running out. And neither of them let go. Asterisk. The sound of distant engines grew louder, a low vibration, trembling through the station's rusted frame. Gavin heard it even through the hum of failing climate controls and the rhythmic whisper of the Empress's breath. Rescue teams, human. Or Jerethi, maybe both. He wasn't sure which worried him more. He checked the seals on her bandages again, though they didn't need checking. It was an excuse to stay close, to keep feeling the strange pulse of warmth that seemed to radiate from her whenever their skin touched. He had no scientific explanation for it, and frankly, he didn't care. All he knew was that every time she looked at him with those crystalline eyes, something inside him shifted, something he thought war had burned away forever. Her voice broke the silence, soft but clear. "You shouldn't have done this." He didn't glance up from the med scanner. "What? Saved your life?" "Touched me." She was watching him, her face calm, but her patterns, those intricate silver glyphs, were dim no longer. They pulsed faintly now, like the beat of a distant star. "Do you understand what happens if they find us like this?" "Yeah," Gavin said, still focused on the scanner. "I die. You lose your throne. Galaxy spins out of control. Billions suffer." He set the device down and met her gaze head on. Guess what? That was going to happen anyway. Her lips parted as if to reply, then closed again. For a long moment, she just stared at him. The Empress of 17 star systems, a woman worshipped like a goddess, sitting on a cracked med table with dust in her hair and a human soldier at her side. "They tried to kill me," she said finally. Her voice was steady, but he heard the note beneath it, cold and sharp as broken glass. "Not your people. Mine. Someone on my council planned this." They used the summit as a stage. Gavin's stomach clenched. "Any idea who?" "Val." The name was a whisper, but the hatred in it burned. "My cousin, next in line for the throne. He believes in the old ways. Absolutely. He would rather see me dead than changed." "Changed?" Gavin's mouth twitched into something that wasn't quite a smile. "You mean because of this?" He lifted his hand, hesitated, and then brushed his fingertips lightly over hers. Her patterns flared in answer, silver fire racing across her skin like rivers of light. Her breath hitched. "Yes." Gavin studied the glow, hypnotized despite himself. "You said this wasn't normal." "It isn't." Her voice was barely audible. "When we bond with another of our kind, the patterns brighten, temporarily. But this..." She shook her head, disbelief softening into something like awe. "It shouldn't be possible. What does it mean?" "I don't know." She looked up at him, and for the first time since he'd found her in the wreckage, She wasn't an empress or a monarch or a living law. She was just a woman, frightened, curious, alone. Davin stepped closer. Then we figure it out together. Her gaze dropped to his mouth for the briefest second, and that was all it took. The air between them thickened, heavy with unspoken things. His heart hammered like the recoil of a railgun. He should have stepped back, should have remembered the laws and the death sentences, and the fact that Jarathi honor duels usually ended in severed heads. Instead, he leaned in until her breath brushed his cheek. "This is madness," she whispered, and her hand rose hesitant, trembling until her fingers touched his jaw. The warmth seared through him like fire through frost. Absolute madness. "Yeah," Davin murmured. "Guess I'm contagious?" Her laugh was soft, almost broken, and then her lips found his. The kiss wasn't gentle. It was desperate, fierce, like two people clawing for something real in a universe built on lies. Her hands gripped his armor, as if anchoring herself. His fingers tangled in her metallic threaded hair, pulling her closer until the silver patterns on her skin ignited like a storm of stars, casting the med bay in shimmering light. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard. Her forehead rested against his, her voice a whisper only he could hear. "They will kill you for this," she said. "Then let them try," Davin replied, his pulse a drumbeat in his ears. The engines outside roared louder now, the unmistakable thrum of Jarathi interceptors, mixed with the heavier growl of human gunships. Searchlights lanced through the night, sweeping across the shattered landscape and slicing through the station's fractured windows. Dot time was up. "They found us," Davin said, grabbing his rifle and checking the charge. His voice was steady, but his gut twisted. "We're out of options." "No." Kalstra slid off the table, her movements slow but certain, robes pooling like shadows around her feet. Her pattern still blazed with living light. "We have one." "What's that?" She looked at him with eyes that gleamed like cut crystal and said, "We stand together." Outside, armored boots struck the metal floor, echoing down the corridor. Voices rose in the distance, human and Jarathi both. Orders, warnings, the clash of two worlds closing in. Davin raised his weapon. Kalstra raised her chin, and neither let go of the other's hand. The first thing Davin heard was the hiss of pressure locks breaking. Then came the echo of boots heavy, synchronized, filling the corridor with the cold precision of trained killers. The sound crawled up the steel walls like thunder, closer with every breath. He tightened his grip on his rifle. "Jarathi?" he asked, voice low. Kalstra's head tilted, listening with those gem-cut ears of hers. "Yes," she said after a moment. Her voice was calm, too calm. "And humans?" Davin's stomach dropped. A joint rescue effort? Or a standoff waiting to happen? His visor chimed with an incoming transmission request, the ID code blazing Torres, his commanding officer. He ignored it. The med bay door trembled as something heavy slammed into it. Sparks danced across the seam. "Stay behind me," he said. Her laugh was soft, bitter. "You think I need your protection?" "Humor me," Davin replied, shifting to shield her anyway. The door gave way with a shriek of tortured metal, panels folding inward under the weight of Jarathi shock troopers. Crimson armor gleamed under. The pale station lights, their helms carved like predatory masks, rifles humming with lethal charge. Behind them, human peacekeepers flooded the opposite corridor, gray armor and matte black rifles bristling with restraint bolts. Captain Torres led the squad, helmet off, her dark eyes locking on Davin the second she entered. "Commander Kane," she barked, voice cutting through the rising tension. "Step away from the alien." Davin didn't move. His rifle lowered slightly, but his stance screamed defiance. "Stand down," Torres ordered again, every syllable a sharpened blade. "That's an empress you're touching." Do you have any idea? Yes, he cut in, his voice low but steady. I know exactly who she is. Kalstra stepped forward then, her arm brushing his. Her patterns flared brighter at the contact, filling the room with a shimmer of silver light. Every Jerathi guard froze, harmonic gasps rising through the chamber like a broken choir. Divine Empress. The lead guard choked, dropping to one knee so fast his armor clanged. Forgive us your radiance. Enough, Kalstra said, her voice a silken blade slicing through the silence. The authority in her tone turned grown soldiers into trembling statues. General Vex, she added, her eyes locking on the commander of her guard. He stepped forward, helm retracting to reveal faceted eyes blazing with outrage. Your Majesty, Vex said, voice vibrating with the harmonic undertone of fury. You are touching it. His gaze snapped to Davin, venom in every syllable. Contamination protocol must be enacted immediately. Protocol can burn in the void. Kalstra snapped, her voice cracking like thunder. Commander Kane saved my life. Harm him, and you will answer to me. The room froze, not just Jerathi soldiers, humans too. Torres stared, disbelief etched across her face. Your Majesty, Vex tried again, more cautiously this time. Perhaps the contact has clouded your judgment. If you allow us to cloud it? Kalstra turned slowly, her silver glyphs blazing like molten veins beneath her skin. Her gaze could have cut hull plating. For 3 centuries, I have been your untouchable goddess. For 3 centuries, you bowed and obeyed, never daring to question the prison you helped build around me. And now you accuse me of weakness because I choose to live? A murmur rippled through the Jerathi ranks. Some lowered their eyes. Others gripped their weapons tighter, confused and afraid. Torres stepped forward, her own weapon lowering slightly. Empress, with respect, Commander Kane, is a human citizen. He falls under my jurisdiction. Then consider this, Kalstra said, lifting her chin like a blade poised to strike. He is under my protection. Ancient law. Any who harm him will face execution. That silenced even Torres. General Vex found his voice at last, trembling with suppressed rage. Protection law requires intimate knowledge of the one you claim to shield. Surely your Majesty has not? Careful, Vex. Her words were soft, but the harmonic resonance behind them made the walls hum. Very careful. The standoff hung like a suspended blade, humans on one side, Jerathi on the other. Davin felt sweat trickle down his spine, but he didn't let go of her hand. Neither did she. He leaned close enough that only she could hear him. You know this can't hold forever. I know, she whispered back, her voice shaking for the first time since he'd met her. But I will not let them take you. Not now. The tension snapped when the station shuddered under the rumble of engines. A carrier-class vessel descending, shaking the ground like a god's heartbeat. Both factions glanced toward the sound. A next move could ignite a war. Kalstra turned, her patterns blazing brighter than ever, and spoke with a calmness that chilled him. Get me a secure channel, she commanded. Summon the council. If they want an empress, they will hear my terms. Davin stared at her, heart-hammering. Terms? Her eyes locked on his, molten silver burning in their depths. If they want peace, she said, voice trembling with something fierce, something irrevocable, they will recognize my bond. Before he could answer, she pulled him closer not for comfort, but for the world to see, and kissed him. Gasps erupted across the chamber. Weapons jerked up. The light from her skin flared so bright, it seared their vision. Outside, engines screamed. Inside, the galaxy shattered. Asterisk. The galaxy spun on a single act of defiance. The kiss lasted only a breath, but in that breath, worlds collided. When Kalstra drew back, Her patterns were blazing like rivers of starlight, flooding the med bay with molten silver brilliance. Every Jarathi present dropped to one knee in instinctive submission, their harmonic voices trembling through the steel floor. Even the humans stared, caught between awe and panic, rifles hovering uncertainly. "Your Majesty," Vex rasped, his voice breaking like brittle glass. This cannot, it already has," Kalstra said. Her words carried a resonance. That made the air hum, a frequency that silenced the room. She stood tall now, no longer the wounded woman Davin had carried through a battlefield. She was Empress again, but something more, something new. "Get me a secure channel to the High Council." Vex's faceted eyes flickered with fury. "You can't now, General," she said without raising her voice. And like the breaking of a chain, he obeyed. Davin felt her fingers tighten around his hand, warm, unyielding. He leaned close enough for his breath to brush her ear. "You know what you just did?" "Yes." Her reply was soft, almost tender. "I lit the match." The secure chamber on the station was a hollow shell of steel and broken terminals. But the Jarathi sphere still thrummed with life when they activated it. Lines of bioluminescent script danced across its surface before blooming into a shimmering field of light. One by one, the faces of the High Council resolved in miter-faceted eyes gleaming, harmonic voices vibrating with outrage as they took in the sight of their Empress, standing hand in hand with a human. "Kalstra," boomed Counselor Zephrys, ancient and sharp as obsidian. "Explain this blasphemy." No, her voice was a blade. "I will not explain. I will declare." Gavin felt the tension coil tighter in the room, saw Torres watching like a wolf scenting blood. Kalstra stepped forward, her patterns flaring. So bright they painted the walls in liquid silver. "This man saved my life," she said, her voice rising in waves of harmonic power. "And I have chosen him as my bondmate under galactic law." The chamber erupted in chaos. Counselors screamed through layered frequencies. Even the humans cursed under their breath. "You defile the bloodline," Zephrys spat. 3,000 years of purity, destroyed by a moment of weakness. "Purity," Kalstra whispered, the word like poison on her tongue. "Do you know what it has bought us? Isolation, stagnation, loneliness so deep it rots the soul." "You will abdicate," another voice snarled. "You will know," she thundered, and the walls vibrated. "You will listen. My patterns have never glowed as they do now. My wounds healed in hours. My strength greater than before." She spread her arms, silver glyphs burning like constellations on living flesh. "You call this contamination. I call it evolution." The room stilled, even the Council's fury faltering as her words sank like knives. "Proof," Zephrys hissed. "You expect us to believe." "I don't expect," Kalstra said coldly. "I provide." The door slid open, and a human woman entered. Dr. Meredith Kane, her white coat streaked with dust. She held a holoslate trembling in her hands. "Biometric scans," she said, voice taut. "Since contact with Commander Kane, the Empress's cellular regeneration has increased by 30%. Neural activity enhanced across all spectrums. Projected lifespan extended by 5 centuries. She swallowed hard. "And her bioelectric signature has stabilized in a resonance pattern previously undocumented in Jarathi physiology." The Council's voices faltered, disbelief breaking into raw fear. "In simpler terms," Gavin said into the silence, "she's stronger now than she's ever been." Kalstra turned to him then, her eyes molten silver, her voice soft but carrying. "Enough power to bend iron. We make it official, now." His brows lifted. "Here, in front of—" "Yes," she breathed. "Before they can move against us." Davin's heart slammed against his ribs. This wasn't what he'd planned. Hell, nothing about this day was what he'd planned. But when she looked at him like a woman who had worn chains of tradition for 300 years and just now tasted freedom, he knew his answer. Then let's burn their damn rulebook, he said. The Jerathi sphere pulsed as she issued the command in her native harmonics, summoning an arbiter from the galactic net. The machine responded instantly, weaving a glowing sigil in the air between them. Torres swore softly. Vex looked like he might implode where he stood. Kalstra reached for Davin's hand again, and when their fingers twined, the sigil flared into a corona of white fire. Repeat after me, the arbiter intoned. Davin didn't understand half the words, but his voice never shook. When the ritual ended, and the sigil burned into their skin like a living brand, the galaxy changed. The Empress of the Jerathi was no longer untouchable. She was bonded to a human. Silence fell, heavy and absolute, before the council shattered it with a roar of layered voices. Treason! Zephrys howled. Trial of supremacy. Invoke the right. The words hit like a plasma bolt. Davin stiffened. What the hell is that? Kalstra's jaw tightened. Her voice was calm, but her patterns flickered like stormlight. An ancient challenge, she said. Combat to prove worthiness. And if you lose? He asked. Her gaze locked on his. You die, I abdicate, and the old ways rise again. Davin's grip on her hand tightened. Then don't lose. Her lips curved, not in fear, but in something fierce and blazing. I don't intend to. Outside, the crimson sky split with the scream of warships, and the first whispers of rebellion stirred across 17 star systems. The Empress was done playing by their rules, and tomorrow she would fight for everything. The ancient arena lay beneath the Imperial Citadel, like a secret carved into the yak. Bones of a world and amphitheater of obsidian and light, where Jerathi emperors once proved their right to rule. It had been silent for 1,000 years. Now it roared with life. The crowd was a sea of silver and gold, nobles draped in ceremonial armor, their harmonic voices rising in layered chords that shook the walls. Across the galaxy, trillions watched through holofeeds as history unfolded. In the center of the arena, beneath a vault of blazing suns, two figures faced each other on the obsidian floor. Kalstra stood in ritual combat, armor-sleek plates etched with silver glyphs that pulsed with the rhythm of her heartbeat. She had stripped away the flowing robes, the towering crown, everything that marked her as untouchable. What remained was something fiercer, a woman who had ruled for centuries and chosen to burn the chains of tradition to ash. The glyphs along her skin blazed so brightly they seemed alive, spilling light through the gaps in her armor like molten stars. Opposite her stood Val, gold-marked, cousin and heir, eyes glinting with hunger for the throne. His voice carried like thunder when he spoke. You shame our bloodline. You spit on the laws of our ancestors. Today, I cleanse that stain. Try, Kalstra replied, her voice calm and lethal. The herald's voice boomed, harmonics spiraling into the sky. Trial of supremacy begins. No interference, no mercy. The gong struck like a planet, cracking. Val moved first, faster than Davin's eyes could track from his position behind the arena shields. His blade a curved arc of photonic steel sliced through the air in a flare of golden light. Kalstra caught the strike with her own weapon, the clash detonating in a corona of sparks that rained like shooting stars. The force drove her back a step, but only a step. Her patterns flared, brighter than before, light flooding the arena floor. Val pressed, blow after blow, his movements honed by decades of combat discipline. He was taller, broader, stronger, or so the crowd believed. But Davin saw what they didn't. The way she flowed, every motion precise, every strike a calculated storm. Not rage, not desperation. Purpose, their blades locked, grinding energy. Shrieking between them, You are always too soft, Val hissed, his face inches from hers. Too merciful. That weakness ends now. Kalstra's lips curved in a smile that froze his breath. Mercy is not weakness. It's the strength you fear. Asterisk, she broke the lock with a twist that spun him off balance, driving her elbow into his ribs hard enough to make his golden patterns flicker. Gasps rippled through the crowd as she pressed her advantage, her strikes now a symphony of light and fury. Sparks leapt. The floor cracked under their feet. Davin's hands clenched into fists. His lungs burned. Every instinct screamed at him to break through the shield, to stand at her side. But this was her fight by law, by blood, by destiny. Val roared and lunged in a final, savage arc, his blade screaming for her throat. Kalstra stepped into the strike. Asterisk. For an instant, time froze, the crowd holding its breath, Davin's heart pounding like war drums. Then her blade flashed in a single, perfect line. Val's weapon shattered in his hands. The silence that followed was heavier than death. Val stood, rigid, staring at the fragments at his feet. Slowly, his knees hit the floor, his golden glyphs dimming like dying suns. The herald's voice thundered across the arena. The Empress prevails. The right is fulfilled. Chaos erupted, shouts of outrage clashing with harmonics of awe, but Kalstra didn't hear them. She stood in the center of the floor, her blade raised high, silver light cascading across the chamber, like dawn breaking in a long frozen world. Then she turned, and her eyes found Davin. The arena shields dropped as she strode toward him, every step a declaration. Guards parted like waves before a storm. When she reached him, she didn't speak. She didn't need to. Her hands, still trembling from the fight, found his face and pulled him into a kiss that burned like fire across the cold expanse of tradition. Gasps rippled through the stands. Holofeeds exploded across the galaxy. When she broke the kiss, her voice carried into every living room, every station, every planet watching. "Hear me," she said, her harmonics ringing with the power of breaking chains. "The age of isolation is over. Our future lies not in purity, but in unity. Today, I choose connection over fear, and I will burn every law that says otherwise." Her patterns flared one last time, brighter than any star. Around her, the crowd was no longer roaring in outrage, but in something else. Wonder, fear, the first whispers of change. Davin touched his forehead to hers, breath ragged. "How does it feel," he murmured, "to start a revolution?" Her smile was a blade and a sunrise all at once. "Terrifying," she whispered. "Exhilarating. And now?" "Now," she said, pulling him closer as the galaxy burned with a million eyes, "we change everything." Above them, the suns blazed like witness flames. In their light, the untouchable Empress of the Jerathi kissed her human consort again, and the old order crumbled to ash. The end.